Clara and David had welcomed their son, Ethan, just 6 months earlier, and their lives revolved around his needs. Amid the sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, they adopted a kitten named Milo from a local shelter. Milo was a gray tabby with wide green eyes, quiet and curious, often found perched on the windowsill, watching the world outside. Clara and David loved Milo's calm presence, and Ethan seemed to find comfort in the soft purring that filled the apartment. The family felt complete, though the demands of parenthood left little room for anything else. Clara worked long hours as a graphic designer, often staying late at the office, while David, a high school teacher, managed most of the household tasks. To ease the strain, they hired a babysitter, Rachel, a young woman with glowing references and a warm smile. Rachel seemed perfect, arriving each morning with enthusiasm and leaving the apartment tidy. For a while, everything worked smoothly. Milo would nap near Ethan's crib, and Rachel handled the baby's routine with ease. But as weeks passed, a subtle tension began to creep into the apartment, unnoticed at first, buried beneath the chaos of their new routine. As the weeks turned into months, Milo's demeanor began to change. The once quiet cat grew restless, his green eyes narrowing whenever Rachel entered the room. He started hissing, a low, guttural sound that Clara and David had never heard from him before. At first, they thought Milo was adjusting poorly to the new schedule. Rachel's presence meant less attention for him, and perhaps he felt neglected. But the behavior escalated. Milo would arch his back and sweat at Rachel's legs when she approached Ethan's crib, his claws catching on her jeans. Rachel laughed it off, saying cats could be moody, but Clara noticed a flicker of irritation in her eyes. David suggested Milo might be jealous of the attention Ethan received, but the explanation didn't sit right. The cat's aggression seemed targeted, precise, only surfacing when Rachel was near the baby. Clara began to watch Milo more closely, noticing how he positioned himself between Ethan and Rachel, his body tense, as if guarding something precious. The couple discussed taking Milo to the vet, wondering if stress or illness could explain his actions, but the idea of giving him up to a shelter crossed their minds for the first time. Clara couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest. Milo's behavior wasn't random. It felt intentional, almost like a warning. She noticed other small details that added to her discomfort. Ethan, usually a calm baby, began to fuss more when Rachel picked him up, his tiny hands pushing against her. Clara wondered if she was imagining things, projecting her own stress onto the situation. David, too, started to question Rachel's habits. He noticed that items in the apartment, a silver bracelet, a pair of earrings, went missing, only to reappear days later in odd places. Rachel always had an explanation. She had moved them while cleaning, or they had fallen behind furniture. But Milo's reactions grew harder to ignore. One evening, Clara saw the cat leap onto the counter, knocking over a glass of water as Rachel reached for Ethan. The babysitter's face flushed with anger, and she shooed Milo away with a sharp gesture. Clara's stomach twisted. She mentioned her concerns to David, who agreed something felt off. They decided to keep a closer eye on Rachel, though neither wanted to believe their instincts just yet. Clara and David's unease grew too heavy to ignore. Milo's persistent hostility toward Rachel, combined with Ethan's discomfort and the misplaced items, pushed them to act. Clara suggested installing a small security camera in the living room, hidden inside a bookshelf, to monitor Rachel's interactions with Ethan. David hesitated, feeling uneasy about spying, but Milo's unwavering aggression convinced him it was necessary. They ordered a discreet camera online, one that could stream footage to their phones. The device arrived 2 days later, and David set it up while Rachel was out for the afternoon. They didn't tell her about it, agreeing to review the footage after a few days to avoid jumping to conclusions. Meanwhile, Milo's behavior grew more intense. He began following Rachel around the apartment, his eyes locked on her every move, and he refused to leave Ethan's side when she was present. Clara noticed the cat's fur standing on end whenever Rachel reached for the baby, and her heart raced with a mix of guilt and dread. The thought of sending Milo to a shelter resurfaced, but Clara pushed it aside, determined to understand what was driving his actions. 3 days after installing the camera, Clara and David sat down to watch the footage. They started with the first day's recordings, their fingers hovering over the phone screen, unsure of what they might find. The initial clips showed Rachel feeding Ethan and changing his diapers, her movements efficient but lacking warmth. Then, a moment made Clara's breath catch. Rachel left Ethan in his crib for nearly an hour, crying, while she scrolled on her phone. David's jaw tightened as they watched another clip where Rachel slipped a small decorative figurine from the shelf into her bag. But the worst came later. In a moment that felt like a punch to the gut, Rachel nudged Milo with her foot when he got too close to Ethan, her expression cold and impatient. The cat hissed but didn't retreat, positioning himself protectively near the crib. Clara's hands shook as she paused the video. David stared at the screen, his face pale. The truth was undeniable. Rachel was neglecting their son and mistreating Milo, and the cat had been trying to protect Ethan all along. Clara and David sat in silence after watching the footage, the weight of what they had seen pressing down on them. The apartment, once a place of warmth, felt tainted by Rachel's actions. Clara's mind raced with guilt for not noticing sooner, for trusting someone who had neglected their son and mistreated Milo. David's hands clenched into fists as he replayed the moment Rachel nudged Milo with her foot. They agreed they couldn't let Rachel return. That night, they contacted the agency that had recommended her, detailing what the footage revealed. The agency promised to handle the situation, but Clara and David also decided to involve the authorities to ensure Rachel faced consequences for taking their belongings. As they made the call, Milo curled up beside Ethan's crib, his steady purring a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. Clara looked at the cat, her heart heavy with gratitude and regret. They had considered giving him away, blaming him for the disruption, when all along he had been the one trying to protect their family. The next morning, 2 police officers arrived at the apartment. Clara and David showed them the footage, their voices steady despite the turmoil inside. The officers took notes, their expressions grim as they watched Rachel's neglectful behavior and the moment she pushed Milo. They assured the couple that they would follow up with Rachel and investigate further. After the officers left, Clara and David sat with Ethan, who babbled softly, unaware of the storm that had passed. Milo leapt onto the couch, nudging his head against Clara's hand, and she scratched behind his ears, tears welling in her eyes. The couple reflected on how close they had come to giving Milo away, mistaking his protectiveness for aggression. David admitted he felt ashamed for doubting the cat, while Clara resolved to trust her instincts moving forward. They began discussing changes to their routine, determined to prioritize Ethan's safety and never again rely on someone they didn't fully know. In the days that followed, Clara and David took steps to restore balance to their home. Clara reduced her hours at the design firm, arranging to work from home when possible, while David adjusted his teaching schedule to be more present for Ethan. They interviewed new caregivers with caution, choosing a trusted family friend to watch Ethan temporarily. Throughout this transition, Milo remained a constant presence, his watchful eyes following every movement near the baby. He no longer hissed or swatted, his demeanor calm once Rachel was gone. Clara noticed how Ethan reached for Milo, giggling when the cat brushed against his tiny hands. The bond between them grew stronger, a quiet reminder of the cat's unwavering loyalty. Clara and David began to see Milo differently, not just as a pet but as a vital part of their family. They replaced the missing items Rachel had taken, but the emotional weight of her betrayal lingered. They vowed to be more vigilant, to listen to the subtle signs they had overlooked before, especially those from Milo. The apartment slowly regained its warmth, filled with Ethan's laughter and Milo's soft purrs. Clara and David never again considered giving Milo away. The thought now seemed unthinkable. The cat had sensed what they couldn't, protecting Ethan when they hadn't realized he needed it. Milo continued to sleep beside Ethan's crib, his green eyes alert, his presence a steady comfort. Clara often watched him, marveling at his instincts, while David made a point to spend evenings playing with both Ethan and Milo, strengthening their family's bond. The couple learned to trust more carefully, relying on themselves and those closest to them. The ordeal with Rachel left scars, but it also brought clarity. They had nearly lost a protector in Milo, mistaking his warnings for trouble. Now they understood his role. Milo, the quiet tabby, had become their guardian, his loyalty a silent promise that held their family together through the storm.